Okay, this is June 8th, 2015. This is a cohort of teachers from Cincinnati and also one extra person, which will be coming from us from Arizona. And first thing is talking about human-centered design. And you had two assignments to kind of look at the questions on human-centered design and in your documents. And so there was some pieces about cognitive and divergent thinking. And first question is about human-centered design and why do you think design is difficult? Does anybody have any ideas about why design can be difficult? Ideas? No?
Well, the first one is it requires designers to manage many ideas and aspects at one time, correct?
Yes. So it's always looking at all of those aspects of design and aspects of not only what we think, but also the requirements of the stakeholder, which brings into that human-centered design piece. So all of those pieces together make it difficult. So that is one of those pieces of it. And so as we were looking at the project identification phase, I think we're looking at human-centered design, and then we're also looking at the second one, which is, I'm trying to make sure I get this right, project identification phase and teamwork. And that's what I think is we have also, right? Is teamwork?
Yes.
Great, very good. Okay, on my screen, I think you have the teacher toolbox and team roles and responsibilities. Do you see that document? That's on
your screen?
On my screen?
I see a lovely ocean.
Ah, okay, thank you. Well, I will change it. Thank you. There we go. So are you seeing the teacher toolbox? Nope, not yet.
There. I see it.
Yeah.
Are you seeing it now, Tisha?
Yes.
Great, very good. Okay, when one of the hardest parts about doing epics, as far as it can get daunting to think about all of the different tasks that can happen with all of the different projects. So one of the suggestions is this is a way that we work with our teaming at Purdue, and it works pretty well. But before we get into that, let's think about how do you team in your classroom, or if do you team with your students, and how do you assign roles and all of that? Does anybody want to take that to begin with?
I mean, I think that for me, this is Michelle, I think that this is something I could work on. This is something that I don't do very well. So I'm excited. I was excited to see these roles because I do team, but I do not do roles. So I was excited to see this written out because I feel like the ones that I have found have been more geared towards middle school or elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
So I was excited to see this so that they can, take a little bit. It's a more of a, little bit more mature way to look at different roles.
Okay, cool. With anybody else want to add in any ways that you that work well with you with teaming? Because obviously you guys have been teaching a while and you have successful programs. How is there ways that you are teaming that kind of help you to get things together?
Well, I use.
Go ahead, Chuck.
I'm sorry, getting feedback. I use teaming in a modeling physics class and also in an engineering class. I've learned sort of about picking who's on what team. Sometimes I can do it by random. Other times, and that's what I'll usually initially do is when the class starts out, I'll have them random. But then after a while, I start picking and choosing. I rarely let them choose their own teams because they'll just pick friends.
Yeah.
And I think we don't get into specific roles usually, and I usually let them iron them out themselves. I think responsibility and accountability is difficult, and I always tell them to email me if they're having a problem with a particular person in the group, so that they don't. And I try to handle that without talking to people directly about it.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's great. Does anybody else have any suggestions on how you work with teams and teaming?
This is Holly. We spend a lot of time at the beginning of the year, and our role's a little bit different, Tisha and Colleen and myself, in that we're in a K-8 building. So I teach middle school, and we do a lot with the Myers-Briggs and the multiple intelligences first. And we talk about what strengths and weaknesses are, and then that's how the kids start to identify what roles would be good. And so, like, I'm looking at your list, and I have similar, like, some of the jobs, you know, they don't necessarily have the same names.
Yes.
But at first it's hard, especially for those sixth graders coming in, because you don't know them as well. But we will kind of bid out what kinds of people they need to inhabit those roles during a certain project, because it changes. If the project has more design or more art to it, you know, we might pick a different kind of team leader. So it takes a while. It's like a lot of effort in sixth grade, but in eighth grade it's kind of cool. Yeah. You know, they get it, and they tend not to pick friends then, because they realize that might be a sinking ship.
Yes. One of the things that I did this year that I hadn't done with the college kids is, I think that for me, I was intimidated by the college kids, and intimidated thinking that they knew more than they did. And so I didn't go through the Code of Conduct of Cooperation until second semester. And boy, am I glad I did, because it really helped to, what a Code of Cooperation and Conduct is, that they develop their own ideas of what their norms are. And as a class, that worked really, really well for me and for us, because they had to decide what were their rules. And most of the times kids do, or in classes, you do create your own rules. But it seemed like it was really helpful for the students to walk through that Code of Cooperation and Conduct. And that is in the teacher toolbox, if you want to look at it sometime, is 117, is the Code of Conduct and Cooperation. But one of the things that we set up, and Chuck was talking about accountability, and that was another part that they put into their Code of Cooperation, was who was that they were responsible to the whole group, and they were accountable. And as they walked through their project, they put that into their Gantt chart, who was responsible for which part of the project. So that made it important, and it made it so that they all knew who had to do what to get the project done. Now, another thing that might be helpful in a cooperation and a Code of Cooperation, if you choose to do that with your kids, is to also include another part in the Code of Cooperation where they are responsible to the group to get the whole thing done. So if somebody is overwhelmed, that they help pick up the slack. And so I don't know how to even phrase that, but it was an important part of one of our kids was deciding that he had only done his job, but there was more work that needed to be done. So just kind of getting that done in some way. But also in the Code of Cooperation and Conduct, there are two examples in there. One is from Boeing and one is from Penn State, which you can use with your kids, which help them to develop their own Code of Cooperation and Conduct. So I just wanted to show that out and throw that out first before we get into the roles. So it's just there. Hello, how are you? We have another person here with Tisha.
Hey, Teddy.
Hi, Teddy. Is that Teddy?
Yeah.
Hi, Teddy.
Good. Well, I'm going to go on to the teacher toolbox and the team roles and responsibility. The team leader, and these really do work well. The team leader is the person who is, oh, we run another one. Hello.
Hi.
The team leader is like your right-hand person. So this person is the one that kind of looks at what's going on with everyone else's projects. And then they also usually are on a team too. But this person really helps to organize things. So they kind of help to make sure that they know what's happening on each team, make sure they understand the Gantt charts and so forth. So it's your right-hand person, which is huge to have that person. Then for each project, you have a project leader. And I think you can see that document. Am I right? You have the project leader. Yes, I think so. Good.
Yes.
Yeah, so you have the project leader who's overseeing whatever project is going on. If you have 4 projects or whatever, that person's in charge of making sure that they understand everything that's going on with that project. Another overarching might be a financial officer. And the financial officer might be really interesting at the high school level because that person could be looking at how to write and ask for funding to get projects done. So that person could be the liaison with your principal, could be the liaison with your parent-teacher organization, could be a liaison to look up for money. So that might be a really good person to have. A webmaster. A webmaster may be someone that, and I don't know if you all have your own web pages. Probably you do in your class. Yeah, and she's laughing. So
I'm laughing because I launched one and then was told I couldn't.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Evil and
That'll change.
Interesting. So is that the same? Is that the way it is
I
now?
went ahead and started a blog. I went ahead and started a blog even though it was frowned upon.
The rebel of the group.
I am.
I'm really surprised because that was one of the big things that every teacher had to have their own workshop or their own web page. Let me see here. Okay, yes, you're right, Chuck. Chuck was saying, I'm assuming that the team roles are just a smart part of participation in the group. Yes, but it also organizes your workload a little bit so that everyone kind of has their own understanding of what they have to get done. And so they're kind of working together, but you have certain jobs. Another important one is your project partner liaison. Instead of everybody in the team contacting your community partner, the project partner liaison would be that person that is continually working with that and communicating with that project partner. Now, a good thing, and I think it's written in here, that they make sure that they contact you, and even with my college kids, they needed to send until I really knew what they were doing, I made them give it to me before they sent it out, just so that there was no silly things. Like one time they'd asked for our project partner to meet with them on Sunday afternoon, and I was like, you can't do that. You can't ask them to meet with you on Sunday afternoon. So just, making sure that there was those pieces that we work through. So you've got your project partner liaison, you have your financial officer, which would be overarching, your team leader, which is overarching. So in your teams, you would have a project leader, a webmaster, or depending on what you do, or maybe an archivist or somebody that's really keeping track of all that, and your project liaison. And then you can divide it down further from that, but that gives you ideas. Any thoughts about those team roles?
Jean, what's the duration of the type of project that you're talking about where these team roles exist? Because it seems like it would be kind of a longer project.
Well, no, in fact, it's one of those things that it's divided that way every semester. So
okay, but semester project, or is it for each project during the semester?
For each project during the semester, there is
Okay.
those basic project, the project leader, the webmaster, and the liaison in each
Okay.
of the projects, and then you have the overarching, the team leader, financial officer. And those would be,
Okay.
but you'd probably want to change them every semester so that everybody's getting it. Go ahead. Was somebody adding in? Okay, so just so that those are the ideas about how to talk or how to get organized with the team roles. So as you find things that work for you, share them out. These are just things that we have found work, and you can do whatever works for you and however you organize. But those basic really do help to stay organized. Okay? Any questions about that? Okay. So let's go on. We were talking, and we have kind of gone over on when we were together. We went through the project identification phase, and you should be able to see that on my screen. And if there's a thumbs up, you've got it. That'd be great. Good. Awesome. So with the project identification phase, overall, this is the one that kids and people do not like the most because it takes a lot of time. But if you do this phase right, you will have a more useful project than if you skim through it. So it's just a thought of making sure that you really do a good job of identifying the project and walking through the pieces of it. So, you know, you're working through this project charter. The project charter planning, that's going to be one of those documents that the kids will use all the way through, and they'll keep updating it. And so it is one of those documents that is a Word document on the web page, so you can pull it up, and then the kids can make and keep changing it as they go along. But it talks about the, you know, your objectives and your deliverables, what you're trying to get done, the duration of the project, how long you think it's going to be, and the stakeholders and figuring that out. But also in one, it's also looking at the community, observing, checking out what is needed, and interviewing. Another part is looking at demographics. Now, it depends on your project, and if you're starting it off in your school, the demographics may not make that big a difference, but it may be one of those things that if you're outside of your school, that you may want to really look at the demographics. Okay? Any questions about the demographics? Okay. And then your project partner, project and community partners, looking at those. And it's a lot of what you're doing already kind of in your planning, in your project or your the implementation plan that you're working on. That's another part of this. Okay? Okay. And the interviews and research. Now there are three documents, and you kind of see the PERT chart and critical pathways. With younger kids, I know some of you are middle school. I don't know how you feel about doing a PERT chart. And the PERT chart is for just what are the important tasks and what can be done instead of everything being done linearly, what can be done stacking it so things can be done at the same time. It'll be up to you how much you want to use the PERT chart, where you want to put the PERT chart in. I was working with Arizona teachers last week, and they were considering not putting the PERT chart in one, but putting it in further into the process further when they get into specifications. Again, the reason we put it in one is because it was a baseline document that they would continually upgrade. So it's kind of up to you how you use it and however you want to make it happen. So that was just something I'm thinking about, okay?
So when you, and I don't want to take a lot of time for this if it wasn't on your agenda, but you know, I needed something like this at the end of the year. So where were you, Jean? But we were trying to do our science fair projects together, creating these growth chambers on a different planet. And you know how kids get done with their part of the job faster than somebody else onto something else. And so then I would try to move them to the next section.
Uh-huh.
So when you write in this first, is that task one? Like, how do you know what's more important on those, on the PERT chart?
Well, when it's what is more important, well, like the task one, this one obviously has to happen before anything else can happen here.
Okay, I see it now.
Yeah. And there is, let me make sure I'm right before I don't want to lie to you here. But
I don't want to get you off course. I'm sorry. I just had seen that before.
I appreciate you guys asking questions. Okay, so in 114, there is the use of a PERT chart. So here it's talking about the PERT chart.
Awesome.
And how it can work. Okay, so that's 114. Okay. Great.
I'll go there.
Yeah, no, but you can, that's a good point. One other thing I wanted to talk to you about, and this is a program called Poplet. And let me go ahead and show you that real quick. It is, let me see if I can get that right. And there is also a teacher toolbox for Poplet, but it is like this, the mind web, where you can create your own Poplet. So with Poplet, and again, that's in your teacher toolbox, so you could print it out for your kids to do that. So like a Poplet, like there, you get 5 free of these Poplets. Okay. And I think you can see this, right? Yeah. But it can show, it's really nice because you can create your Poplet or add into it, and the kids can do that and continue to add into it and change, and they can put pictures in. So it's a nice online tool that's free that you can use as a thought organizational map, and it's a great way for your PERT chart.
That's awesome.
So it's Poplet, P-O-P-P-L-E-T .com, I think that's right, yeah, .com. And then also, I went back on my page to my resource library, and if you scroll down to, and you all have access to this point, if you go to your teacher toolbox, and in there is a document about Poplet, and it's, don't forget, you got 2 pages on that, so you may have to go to your second page, and there's Poplet 1.21, and it's really, and so it's a kind of a handout, so your kids can walk through how to use Poplet and create their own account. Okay?
That's cool.
Okay, good. So I thought I would throw that in. Yeah, just keep asking questions, because that makes it more worthwhile for you and helps me to know what you need. Okay? Okay, so back, let me go back a little bit. So yeah, you've got your PERT chart, and you also have Also your Gantt chart. So with your Gantt chart, and that's another thing, thank you to Monica and Nunez was able to help me figure out how to make sure that you had all of the documents that you needed on your web page. So we have on here, when you go to your documents, and I'll have to work with the middle school yet, so don't get too crazy. If you need, you may have to go to one in the full year, but also here's your Gantt chart on 119. And what a Gantt chart is and it could be whatever works for you, but it is a way of showing your kids, or they create their documents using an Excel document, in Excel. And what we did was let's see here. Find out what happened here. Trying to make sure that the document came up, and I may have to check that out. I'm going to let it be for a minute while I look through this. Well, here's a Gantt chart, and it has who the people are that need it and the task to be completed, and then it's got your weeks. So a Gantt chart, how many of you, have you ever worked with a Gantt chart before? I see Dan. Hi, Dan. I'm going to send you a thing in there.
Hello, Jean.
Glad you're here. But a Gantt chart, and you may want to just use a timeline, but the reason that I suggested a Gantt chart is, again, because we want the students to understand that sometimes they think of timelines as just like they did in third grade, where you're 5 years old and you do this and so forth, but they don't think about that at 5 you went to school, you may have played baseball, you may have done all these different things. They don't always think all of the stacking that can happen. And that's another thing about the Gantt chart, is so that they see that all of the pieces that can go into their project. Okay?
Do they have one Gantt chart per student, or is it per project?
They would have one Gantt chart per project. So, yeah. Okay? And they can all work on that together, obviously. And then they can share it. But it's an important process of, they should always share that Gantt chart with you. Anytime that you're, asking, seeing what they're doing, they should be sharing where they are in the Gantt chart, how far they've gotten into a project.
Is that something that can be posted like up in the classroom where it just stays and they fill it in as a needed basis, or is this something that they should need or would need to keep with them?
However works for you, whatever you think might work. I wonder if it would get really messy doing it that way. It could be, it is supposed to be it is a messy document, though. It will be, because it is supposed to be something that changes, because it will change. It's not going to stay the same. It can't, well, it might if you had a perfect world and a perfect project and you had everything all worked out. But reality is that chart is going to change as you develop, as it develops.
I was just thinking, for us, it might be easy to have it located in a central location where any time as the teachers, whether it's Holly or Tisha or I, since all three of us are working, we would know where it's located. We could kind of see where the progress is on the project and know where the students are.
That sounds like a good idea. Yeah, I don't see where that would be a problem at all. I think that would be a good use of it. That makes a lot of sense. Anybody else have an idea of what they'd like to do it? Okay.
It might be a good idea to maybe do a Google Doc of it too, and be able to share it with everybody, like your team members, and then also the teacher. You can go back and see different revision histories and changes to it as well.
That's an excellent idea. A Google Doc is a super idea. Great idea. Yeah. And as the changes go. So I had put it up on Dropbox, and for some reason right now I'm having errors with my Dropbox, and I don't know exactly why. So I don't want to waste our time with that, but I'll figure it out and get it put back together and figure what happened. So that's a part of that with the Gantt chart. Okay. So the whole point of, again, that first identification phase is they're setting up their project, they're setting up the collaborative piece and the building that relationship with the stakeholder and with each other so that they can move through the project. But it's an important, that first, if you look through the first identification phase, there are more lessons than any other, because it is an important part, and it's the one that most people don't spend any time on. But it isn't, if you don't spend that kind of time on it, it's not human-centered. It is an important part to understand who the people are, what they need, and how you're going to meet that need through the EPICS project. So it's an important part of that. Okay. So let me go back. Okay, going back to that gate for just one more second. Also, one other piece that they are designing is they're trying to figure out an initial budget. If they figure out an initial budget, then they will know what kind of money they have to try to figure out, or how this is going to work, how they are going to be able to come up with and figure out how they're going to get the materials to build the program, the project, or whatever. So that's an important part. So they have time to figure out how they're going to come up and how it's going to be funded. So thinking about that. So and then so that's about how that comes about. Now, I got to also say that I also have in here in one there's an initial backpack project, and that's only in high school. It doesn't happen in the middle school. In high school, they have this backpack lesson from 1-6 to 1-10, and what they do is they design a backpack for some stakeholders. And we do that so that they get an understanding of walking through the whole design or a mini design cycle. So that's a part of one. It's 1-6 through 1-10, and they also walk through the initial a gate. It's called Gate 0. So they get used to having to present. So that might be something over the next week to kind of look at as a high school teacher. Because that is a part of that. So as they're getting ready to go through one, as the high school teacher or high school group, they also will show their backpack prototype so that they can talk about what they learned from that process. We just did that in Arizona, and I wasn't sure about how it worked. And I was very pleased with how it worked, because there were a couple of things. One, it made the teachers get out of their comfort zone as far as materials, because they were working with cloth, they were working with sewing, or they were working with materials that they weren't used to working with. And that put another level to it, where they had to think about how to use different ways of doing it, how to develop this project. So I thought it was really, really helpful for them to be able to be put into the parts of a student and not knowing how exactly to get this done. So I thought it went really pretty well. So that's kind of one. And that's just another part of it. And we kind of went through that at the workshop, spent some time on one, so I don't want to, beat the dead horse on this. But I also wanted to talk to you about a piece that I want you to start thinking about all the way through this next 3 weeks, is to think about how you're going to implement it in your school. So I wanted to pull that document, that implementation So I'm going to open that real quick. Yeah, I'm real quick, right? I have to go at it another way. For some reason, it doesn't want to go up that way. Sorry, y'all.
Who's our at the beach?
Yeah, it's Cancun. Yeah, it was nice. I liked it.
If somebody play some ocean music.
I know. Yeah, that'd be nice. So what I wanted to show you is, and this is also in there, this is your teacher project planning. So it just kind of goes about your statement of what compelling needs are you finding in your school. So it could be more than one. It could be, and this could be, what you're trying to do is just brainstorm, thinking about all of the ways that your students might, all of the problems that they might find and issues in their own school or their community. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to kind of be one step ahead of your kids. So that's the reason you're planning this. It's not that you're going to tell them what to do. You're just trying to get an idea of what they might come up with so that you can help guide them into something that is going to be the best use of their time for a project. So that's the reason we go through this. It is very similar to what the kids are going to be doing in their project charter. So it's very similar. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to think about what are stakeholders, what are the requirements, what are the benefits, what are the products that they're going to come up with, secondary stakeholders, and then also looking at your standards, because the kids are not necessarily going to be looking at standards, but you will definitely want to, is look at what the next generation science standards are, and obviously the engineering standards, and then your content standards, whatever that could be, along with your English language arts, and there will be also the mathematics that goes into your budget. Also, any of the testing will also use math standards. So you're going to start looking at that and thinking about that. So yeah, go ahead.
Question.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm curious. Is this after they've already gone out to look for projects, or have you found this? That's where I'm confused.
And what you're doing is you're kind of doing groundwork for yourself, so that when the students come back and say, well, we want to build a bridge across the creek in the back of the school, you've already kind of thought that through. That is it doable? And if you look at the bottom of the sheet, it asks you, with your outcomes, is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it realistic? And is it worthy of the time constraints? Can it be done in the time limit? So what you're thinking is you're already thinking about what they might come up with. What I've seen is that kids come up with these humongous projects, and you have to rein them into something that can be done, is doable. So you're already thinking about that, so that, yes, the students can go out and do that, and you may let them hit that wall, but after they've hit that wall and bounced back, you'll have something that will help them to move forward. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I just don't understand where in the process this is happening, because it's sort of like at the beginning, it's like you have an open book, so you're not trying to go out beforehand and do all this beforehand. It's just when they come back with an idea, then you go through it. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, but I'm also saying that before you're even giving them ideas, you've got your own thoughts together. So like in my community where I live, I would be looking at I know that there is the Goodwin Center, which is a senior center that also has a Head Start program. I know that that's in my community. I also know we have a high poverty rate in my community. So those are things that I already know. So what I would be doing is I would be looking to make sure that I understood who the contacts were for the Goodwin Center. We also have a community garden, who the contact person was for the community garden. So if they come up with some kind of a project where, say they want to improve the water quality of this drainage ditch out by the school, I may have thought that through, and I've also figured out, can we do it? Do you know what I mean? So that we don't get sucked down a rabbit hole that we can't get out of.
I just see that there's a lot of possibilities.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I see that there's a lot of possibilities that could happen.
Exactly.
If I let my students go. So you're saying my prep work for this class would be going through and just identifying all those different ones and filling out this sheet essentially.
It will be helpful, I would think, because of.
Well, yeah. It's a little time consuming.
Well, and you don't have to go through all of it, but you are getting some major ideas about what is possible, because the kids may not have any ideas about possibilities. Okay. They may not.
Or they do, but they haven't figured out yet. How do you contact? Like for middle school, how do they contact? So right. I spend like a lot of my off time. I'm constantly scouting, and I just keep a little notebook in the car and kind of write them down. And then if I'm bored at night, I'll just kind of scan the internet to see who I contact and do they have stuff for us. And that's where your parents come in too, I would think.
Yes.
The parents can bring a problem from or from their own, we have a lot of moms and dads who are wanting to volunteer but don't know how, and now this kind of gives us a way where we can ask them to do some of that footwork for us too, I would think.
Yes. So you've got a listing of those parents that are really willing to help, what they might be willing to do, and so when the kids come back, you could say, okay, well, I know this person, your job now is to contact that person. Do you know what I mean? So you've kind of got some understandings already in your head, so that and I know the kids are supposed to do this work. It's not that we take that out of their hands, but we also, it's just like you kind of want to have an understanding of what could happen before they get into it, so that and the perfect example is that I use is that the one where they were trying to develop this kayaking platform on the Potomac River. If they'd done more work ahead of time or more thought into what the problems were with this, and had 2 or 3 or 4 ideas, when they hit the roadblock with this, they could have shelved it and then gone on to something that was doable. We want to make sure that they have a success. So the more background that we can do, the better off it will be. But here's another thing: you don't have to do this. It's just that for me, I always feel better if I kind of have an understanding of what are the possibilities before we get into this, and so that if somebody says I really don't know what to do, or we're going to redesign all of the, they could decide that they want to completely redesign and do solar power for the school. If they get into something like that, I think it's too massive, and I think it'll be difficult to do. So trying to scale it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. I have in your documents, I wanted to bring up one other. We've got about 9 minutes or so left, and so I wanted to show you one of the documents from Xavier. And this is Janet Membrino, who was doing this. This is for her outdoor classroom, and she did this last year. So you might kind of look over this, and it says, the compelling need, and there's vacant lots in urban settings that can be used as seen as an eyesore. So this space could be used for the urban farming and green space. So that was the overarching idea. So she kind of went through this and the objectives for the project, who the stakeholders are, and this was in her own head. And then she has the community people to kind of help her so she knows who these people are. So another thing, if something were, God forbid, to happen to you, this document would be there so that somebody else could kind of see where they were and pick it back up. So it's just a thought to kind of stay organized so that it makes it easier to keep everything kind of moving along. So you've kind of done this ahead of time, and then see what the kids come up with. So does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So we're almost out of time. Any comments about where we are and what the thought process is of what we're trying to do in the next 3-4 weeks to kind of help you prepare for the next year?
I think from a middle school's point of view, I think for us, and if I might be wrong here, Holly, but I think for us it would be more beneficial for us to help kind of guide the kids into direction first until they understand the whole process.
Yeah.
I think it's that our timeline is more drawn out than a high school's timeline would be.
Right.
So that we're with intentionality, I would think, teaching them the design process, really getting into what team roles are, and focusing on like the bare bones of that the first time they go through, and then by the time they're 8th graders, this project's a much bigger thing. They can really go out to the community even more. The community now being the city versus maybe the 6th graders community is the school playground.
Right.
And that's
yeah.
That's what I see also, even at a freshman in high school level compared to seniors in high school. They start them off small and in the school, and then expand as they get older and they know the design process better. Yes. Yes, I
wouldn't have seen the 6th graders making phone calls this year, but I had my 8th graders in class, and it was neat to see them get somebody who stopped them immediately, and the look on their faces like, well, why aren't you talking to me? And then the person who finally would stay on the phone and take the questions, and that was cool.
Yeah.
Because they need to know that. I don't think they do that very much anymore. Just call somebody other than their friends.
Yeah.
They don't even call them. They just text them.
It's true. But yeah, it's great for them to have to communicate and come up with a way of, and even practicing that. Practicing talking. That was one of the Taliesin. This was a very interesting another way of implementing epics is a whole town of Taliesin, Arizona. Their Parks and Recreation is the people that are behind epics, and they're working with their youth group, their youth council, who are also working with their seniors. So they were talking about how the kids would talk to the seniors and say, well, you guys ought to do, or you guys ought to. And the seniors were like, I have a name. I'm not you guys. I have a name. Yeah. So it really, that communication really became very interesting. But it was the first time I've seen that. And wow, I can't wait to see what they come up with their projects.
I know this year we even had to teach the kids not to ask questions that could be readily answered on the organization's website.
Okay.
So you don't say, and where are you located? Because it's on the website. They had to come up with questions that go deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
What needs do you need fulfilled might be okay for one organization to call in and talk to them, but the other organization might have those listed on their website. So you have to start making those decisions, the critical, and then that's cross-curricular, because that helps out your English language arts teachers.
Exactly. Very good. Okay. So any other comments about kind of the process and what we're working on and how things are kind of moving? So just a reflection, thinking about human-centered design, and you're going through this, and it's human-centered in that the students are working to develop their own understanding of the community so that they have that relationship to be able to work with those people, the members of their community, and also so that they have that iteration and that again, the relationship, so they can continue to talk and ask questions. So that's what they're doing in that first phase of the design process. So I was just looking through my notes here if anything else. Okay. Any other questions or any thoughts? No?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we will get together and I will send you out a couple other things that we're going to, for the next week. We're going to be talking, I think, next week about assessments and how assessments are built in to this.
Great.
Yes, assessments and the specifications phase. So we'll be talking about that, and I'll send out more information about that this next week. And I totally thank you for your time, because this is your summer break, and I
Thank you.
so appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Jean.
Well, thank you, and we'll talk later.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, Gene.
All right. See ya.